touched our families, taking my child.
This is Van Terry. And this is the man who murdered his daughter, Michael Madison. Mr. Terry's daughter, 18-year-old Sherelda Terry, was one of 3 women who Madison brutally murdered over a 9-month period between 2012 and 2013. But before we delve into the depraved crimes of Michael Madison in more detail, it's essential we first understand his background and what led him to develop such a hatred towards women. Madison was the product of an accidental pregnancy, born on October 15, 1977, to Diane Madison and John Baldwin. His father was absent from birth, claiming Michael wasn't his child. His mother, Diane, was severely abusive towards Michael and his brother. Michael's mother rarely invited children over to play and never went out of her way to encourage social interactions between Michael and kids his age. Birthdays and special occasions were sparsely celebrated, and gifts were almost unheard of. The first recorded instance of physical abuse that Michael suffered happened in 1980. Child Services discovered that Michael's mother had been force-feeding him food, which caused him to vomit. Later that year, a similar incident occurred, which prompted Child Services to remove Michael from his mother's care. Michael was then placed into his grandmother's custody, a recovering heroin addict. However, the respite proved to be short-lived as, following his mother's counseling, Michael was eventually placed back under her care, resuming the cycle of abuse. Michael cannot recall the full extent of the abuse that he suffered because of how young he was. Still, despite this, psychological experts have stated that his sense of helplessness and the absence of nurturing relationships with adults propelled him to construct an alternate reality in his mind. His disassociation with his childhood abuse is likely what fueled his hatred towards women. As Michael matured, his difficulties in establishing social connections became increasingly problematic. By age 16, he had adopted a nomadic lifestyle, living day to day with no sense of direction and finding himself sleeping wherever he could find shelter. By the time he reached his late teens, it was clear to see where he was heading. At age 17, Michael faced charges of delinquency due to allegations of inappropriate physical contact with a fellow classmate. At age 20, he was convicted of drug abuse charges and subsequently imprisoned. A few years later, he would be back behind bars after being found guilty of assaulting a woman. After his release from prison, Michael sank deeper into a life of crime, resorting to drug dealing as a means to survive in the East Cleveland area. In 2012, Michael started dating a woman named Brittany Darby, who he eventually convinced to move in with him. But after Brittany moved in, he informed her that he didn't want the relationship to be exclusive, because he was also dating another woman called Shanta Mahone. Despite this being less than ideal, Brittany continued to live with Michael. But unbeknownst to Brittany and Shanta, things were starting to take a very dark turn behind the scenes. In September 2012, a 28-year-old mother of one, Shatisha Sheely, was reported missing by her mother. Her mother, Kim, described Shatisha as a vulnerable individual and stated that she was worried when she couldn't reach her daughter. That worry intensified when Shatisha failed to attend the funeral of her brother, Dontel Sheely, who was shot during a home invasion. In the months that ensued, the families of other East Cleveland residents were plagued by the same problem, loved ones vanishing seemingly without a trace. In July 2013, the disappearances continued. 38-year-old Angela Deskins was reported missing. Deskins was known to be someone who liked to keep to herself, so at first, when the family members couldn't reach her, they weren't too worried. But as time went on, it became clear that something unusual had happened. A few weeks later, on July 10th, Sherelda Terry was the last to disappear. The book-loving 18-year-old was last seen coming home from work at a Cleveland elementary school. Her father, Van Terry, plastered the local area with missing person posters. But unfortunately, he would never get to see his daughter again. In 2013, Brittany Darby, Michael's girlfriend, confronted him about a foul smell coming from his closet. Michael had informed Brittany that the smell was from a dead raccoon that had somehow made its way inside the closet. But it turns out that putrid odor was actually the decomposing body of Sherelda Terry. Michael moved the body out of his apartment shortly after, but his luck was about to run out. On July 19, 2013, neighbors in the local area notified police of a nauseating stench coming from a nearby garage. When police arrived, they forced their way inside, where they were met with a very disturbing sight: the body of a female wrapped inside several layers of garbage bags. After police identified Michael Madison as the individual renting the garage, they obtained a search warrant and raided his home. Inside, the police stated they found additional evidence that linked him to the chilling crime. As a result, Michael was taken into police custody after a short standoff with authorities. In the days that ensued, 2 more bodies were discovered in the surrounding area of the garage. Both bodies were disposed of in a similar manner, wrapped up in several layers of garbage bags and bound in the fetal position. The coroner determined that the cause of death for the first 2 bodies, belonging to Sherelda Terry and Angela Deskins, was strangulation. However, due to the extensive decomposition of the 3rd body belonging to Shatisha Sheely, a definite cause of death could not be determined. Following his arrest, Michael spent over 10 hours talking to investigators, where he admitted to ending the lives of 3 women. He described in detail putting Sherelda's body in garbage bags and storing her in his closet before relocating the body as the corpse began to smell. During the interview, according to East Cleveland Mayor Gary Norton, Michael also mentioned the name of Anthony Sowell, a Cleveland serial killer. Sowell was convicted of murdering 11 women and dumping their bodies in garbage bags in and around his home in 2009. This prompted some to label Michael as a copycat killer, but this is something that he has denied on numerous occasions since. After his confession, Michael was charged with 3 counts of aggravated murder. His bail was set at $6 million, and he also waived his right to a preliminary hearing. In April 2016, his trial commenced, and initially, Michael's defense attempted to argue that his troubled upbringing had profoundly impacted his mental well-being, questioning his sanity. However, the plea of insanity fell on unsympathetic ears as the jury swiftly rendered a guilty verdict on all charges. The jury also recommended that Michael's life should not be spared due to the heinous nature of his crimes, and he should face the death penalty, a recommendation that Judge Nancy R. McDonnell agreed with. And on June 2, 2016, she sentenced Michael to death.
Upon consideration of the relevant evidence, the testimony exhibits admitted in mitigation, it is the judgment of this court that the aggravated circumstances of course of conduct, felony murder, kidnapping, felony murder, rape, of which the defendant was convicted, outweigh the mitigating factors by proof beyond a reasonable doubt. Accordingly, the sentence of death is imposed upon the defendant, Michael Madison, on counts 1, 4, and 7.
During his time on death row, Michael suffered the loss of his mother. On June 22, 2019, Diane Madison was stabbed to death by 18-year-old Jalen Plummer. Plummer also attacked 3 other people in the home, all of which survived. The knife attack occurred in the same house where Michael was arrested in 2013 after a standoff with police. Plummer was charged with aggravated murder and assault. While on death row, Michael also appealed his sentence, but the Ohio Supreme Court voted unanimously to uphold the death sentence on July 21, 2020. Michael is currently housed at the Chillicothe Correctional Institution in Ohio, awaiting his execution. Would Michael have turned out to be the same cold-blooded killer if he had been born into a loving household? Or do you believe that Michael's violent nature was inevitable? Let us know in the comments below. And if you enjoyed the video, check out this video about the brutal murder of Marcel Hill. Thanks for watching.